drop ceiling with rows of fluorescent lights. Well, all of a sudden, on the left-hand side of my field of view, begins to get noticeably brighter than the other rows. And then the next row does it. And I'm watching this, one row after the other, brightening up. On the right side, it's dim, the demonic side. And it kept going until it was fully gone. And with it went the demonic forces that literally affected my physical eyesight.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God, those moments when heaven and earth collide. And we see God. We see his hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. So here's where we share these great encounter stories about angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences. Welcome. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Every now and then someone will contact me who's never even listened to an episode, but they want to share something. And like Tom here, And people like Tom say things like,
I mean, if I told you my story, I can't put it in a book because ain't nobody going to believe it.
I think we would around here. Yeah. Welcome, Tom. And Tom starts telling me his stories, and it's like, wow, this is right up our alley. And in particular, he tells a number of stories, but there's one in particular that just jumped out at me, and it has to do with this mind-body connection. And there have been so many tests that say, what you think does have an effect on your health. And when you think about the lies you might buy from the evil one who's trying to go after a weakness in you, and I look back in my own life now, Mr. Blind Guy here looks back in his life and goes, ooh, did I buy into something right about here? And then I started losing my vision here. And then the next step is to renounce those lies, to get back in there, renounce the lie, and proclaim the truth that God does want me healed. God does want me to see, but he also wants to educate me in the process of what's going on and how he is healing me. It's interesting, mind and body, and we get into that a little bit in this conversation. But what brought Tom initially to me was he heard me talking about the eclipse, and he's got his own prophetic stuff he wanted to share through this poetry. He's very prolific poetry writer. And so he was just kind of going down a rabbit hole one night on YouTube.
Kind of, I found you in the middle of the night sort of thing.
Yeah, that's how people find me, just creeping around in the middle of the night,
And I didn't even know you existed until I was looking up that about the Ninevehs. And see, I shouldn't even be here doing this. When I was 15 years old and I was going to a Christian school, I was kind of the kid nobody wanted. And I had some ugly things said and done to me quite often. And there came a point during class at a Christian school where I decided I should consider taking my own life to get off the planet. And I had a classmate look at me in all seriousness and said, well, gee, Tom, why don't you stop talking about it and do it? And 3 days later, I did. I took an overdose of sleeping pills. On Monday, when I didn't come back to that school, and I never went back, they literally called my house and asked my parents if I was dead. The first thing I remember being asked when I was coming out of the fog was this question: how many pills did you take? No one asked me why did I do it. No help was offered. And that told me I didn't matter. But then, I was already heading in a prodigal direction, okay? And it got worse. And then when I was 28 years old, and by then I was living up in Chicagoland, and I had my own life the way I thought it should be, and I didn't understand how far off I was. And so I kind of had a little road to Damascus encounter, and yes, they still happen. It happened to me on the interstate at 65 miles per hour while I was driving.
What happened?
Well, I was thinking, and my thought was, I wish I could see my center, if I could get past all the hurt and the scars and the emotional garbage I've picked up in my life. Well, I had a vision. I didn't even know those existed. They never talked about that when I was a kid at church. They didn't talk about a lot of stuff. Anything beyond human control was kept out, okay? So God showed me. And he showed me all this sin being stripped away. And then finally, what was left was a light. And it was beautiful and it was pulsating and it was alive and it was deep inside. See, I know I got saved at 8 years old, but I got into a lot of sin and I really messed up my life. And so anyway, God showed me all that time his spirit was residing in me. I wasn't feeding myself with his word and prayer and all that. I was ignoring him, okay? And so I wound up a few days later at a church altar. And at the end of the service, I went up front for prayer. And I wound up laying down on the floor, flat on my back. And I made a commitment to God I didn't understand. I said, God, I'm sorry for having turned my back on you for so long. I'm giving you my life to the utter depths of my existence. And you know what? He was listening. And it wasn't long after that that he got his wrecking ball out. But he showed me his love and his power first so that I could start trusting him. And then he gave me the hard truth about the life I was living. And I'm going to be real honest. I was a deeply ingrained homosexual. And he stripped that away. And he showed me I couldn't be a Christian truly and following Jesus and be involved in sexual sin. And I don't care what the world says, and I don't care about all this approval. But that I got that kind of approval when I was 16 from adults, well-meaning. And they told me I should just embrace this and keep going. And I sure did. But you know what? God showed me that, and he loved me out of it. He didn't beat me up, but he showed me his truth, and I had to come to accept it. And then I had to walk away from all that I knew that seemed to matter, and the person that was the one I thought loved me the most. But it wasn't really love. It was just very need based. It was, and my story, maybe it's different. I can't help it. But I made an honest commitment to the Lord. And that's what we need to do in this country and quit telling kids that we need to go off into all kinds of sin and just put a stamp of approval and you that's not what God wants. And if we don't stop that, this country is going to die. I know that.
Wow, that's a story, buddy. There were some certain words that jumped out at me. Wrecking ball was one of them because he said the exact. I don't know if he used those words with you. I actually heard him say those words in terms of the fear in my life, which has encased me throughout my life without my even understanding that fear is like smoke that just crawls inside into every piece of your tissue, and you don't even know what it is. And you don't. We think of fear as a fear of heights, as a fear of spiders, as a fear of fill in the blank. No, I'm talking about the fear that doesn't let you move and doesn't allow you to love because you're afraid of something. Um, I heard the words, I'm going to take a wrecking ball to the fear. And I don't know if you heard the words, but you just spoke the words wrecking ball and it jumped out at me.
God has a way of doing that.
Yes, he does have a way of doing that. He does have a way of connecting people. It's an amazing story. I mean, I'm Tom. I'm calling you for one reason, knowing that there's something else here. There's just so many pieces and parts of you that connect that we're supposed to be talking today.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me tell you what. When I found out about spiritual warfare early on, I wound up with about 40 boils on my back. I was just getting started. What happened, I was at a 12-step meeting, a secular one, adult children of alcoholics. And that night I gave the lead on the 12th step because I thought this initial encounter with the Lord, wow, I must be the 12th step of these 12, a spiritual awakening. So I gave the lead on the 12th step and I openly declared Christ in a secular meeting. And starting that night, I went through 2.5 days of hell on earth. And I found out about the demonic side, what it can do. But it's true, greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. But God did a setup job and gave permission for the enemy to attack me directly tried to destroy me utterly. And I even had, like I said, I had physical evidence.
Yeah.
And then after 2.5 days, at the very end of it, even my eyesight was changed, because what happened is in essence, I got set free from the huge demonic oppression that was been on my life for so many years. And so
What happened to your eyesight?
I'm at work. I'm looking into it was our showroom, and I had a big, glass window looking into it. And there was a drop ceiling with rows of uh, fluorescent lights. So I'm on hold with a customer, and I start kind of humming to myself, and I start humming to myself the tune from the song, "Isn't it amazing what a prayer can do? When it all seems hopeless, it'll pull you through. And isn't it amazing how a broken heart grows strong when every now and then that special someone comes along?" Well, all of a sudden, on the left hand side of my field of view, the farthest row from me begins to get noticeably brighter than the other rows. And then the next row does it. And I'm watching this one row after the other brightening up. Now I'm thinking at that point, this is an older building. I think we're having some kind of weird power surge. But when it got in front of me, I saw what it was. It was like looking at a sliding glass door. On the left side, it's bright. On the right side, it's dim. And it kept going until it was fully gone. And with it went the demonic forces that I had been struggling against. And then there was a sense that it was finished. I had just recently made the decision I was going to be parting with my partner. And so all I needed to do was make a conscious choice that I would trust God. And that's how I would make it through. And that's exactly what happened. I realized the demonic depression on my life was so strong, it had literally affected my physical eyesight. And life has been what it normally should have been all along, ever since.
Do you know what a gift you are? Tom, do you know what you just said? You don't know me, you don't know my story. You don't probably know I'm blind. But I'm
You see better than most.
I got to tell you this, because I've never talked about this, and it is becoming so clear, and you just made it crystal clear, and it's going to be a part of my next talk. The day I was born, we forget something. We're all given, we all know this, you're given a guardian angel, and out you go, and God's love, and blah, blah, blah. But what we forget is the enemy isn't sitting by twiddling its thumbs. The enemy is joins in the game right away too, right? He does.
Oh, yeah.
So he's watching, he's observing, he's seeing the tendencies, he's seeing what is instilled in us. He sees that my birth announcement is a baby holding a microphone.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, not a coincidence, right? This. Okay, so and the words, "a new station is on the air." So he sees, if God is doing this, he's looking at this going, if God is doing this, if this is from him, this means this guy is going to be doing something for God that I need to mute. I need to send this guy in a different direction here, because by age 8, I am pretending to be a play-by-play sportscaster, and I'm there in my bedroom, and I'm doing, because I want to be I already know I want to be in broadcasting. I took an aptitude test in high school. I hated everything that they asked me about except one. There's this giant spike that anything to do with broadcasting or public speaking is the only thing I care about. And I can't explain that. I've never been on the radio. I've never given a speech, nothing. And yet I'm drawn to it, right? I was drawn at age 12, 13 years old when I first saw Johnny Carson. I'm going, ooh, wow, you can get paid for being yourself? This is cool. Okay, so you got the good angels whispering all these things about where you're going. Stay on track. There you go. I'm growing up. I'm inside the church. I'm inside the Catholic Church. I'm We're going to Mass all the time. I'm in Catholic schools. When I'm at home, we actually pretend Mass. My older brother's the priest. He's got a towel down his back. Those are his vestments, and I was inside the bubble in all possible ways, going down the right path, seemingly. But while the good guys are whispering all the good stuff of where we're going, yep, that's it, keep coming, the other guy, the enemy, of course, he wants to limit that because he sees what could happen here, doesn't he? He sees what could happen.
Oh, yeah.
But the other thing, if he keeps lying and lying to you and those whispers, and we talked about the fear that gets into like smoke, and if a particular thing happens early on in your life that affects you, and he plays on that and plays on that and plays on that and just lies and lies and lies, by the time I'm 12, 13 years old and I'm already encased in fear and don't even know it,
Yeah.
he can play with some physical weaknesses. As you just said, the physical and the spiritual come together. And how much of the enemy is involved in my going blind? You just said it. The enemy can play on weaknesses in your heart, weaknesses in your back, weaknesses in your body, weaknesses. And if he can mute how well I see, he mutes my career. I can't even see a television camera, let alone how to look at one, right? He can mute
Okay.
my level of impact. So because God is a bore and I leave because who needs it? It's not relevant to my world and I need to go be in radio. So I jump out of the church at the same time I'm jumping into radio. Why is it at age 20, 21, I'm not going to be in a church for about 15 years. Why is it when Billy Graham comes on my television, remember those 3-day crusades that would take over the television station? Remember those?
Oh, yep.
I was riveted by this guy, seeing him stand in front of tens of thousands of people. And I sat and watched that guy. I knew he had something. I knew what he was saying was the truth. I didn't know what was in the Bible. I didn't know how it was all true. But bizarrely, I said to myself, as far away from God as I was and the church as I was, I'd watch this guy and I would say, I could do that. Somewhere deep, deep, deep inside me was a yearning for that, to do that, because that was part of that initial calling of a new station is on the air, a new voice is on the air, right there at birth. It was there because I was supposed to be serving him, and I was a million miles away, and something inside me said, that could be you.
Wow.
So to your point, and
That's
especially over the last year, and I've shared some of this amazing battle against fear in my life, and how he is taking a wrecking ball to it. And when that gets to that intersection, when I'm at that intersection where it truly is done, and he's already told me it's done, it's just a matter of crossing an intersection. When that intersection is crossed, my vision is restored. I have no doubt, just like you explained, watching that light take over the darkness, when I
Yeah.
fully embrace everything you just said, when I fully embrace that Christ is not walking around with a cross that doesn't belong on him anymore. He is not walking around with a cross on. He is resurrected. He is risen. He is free. We remember that incredible sacrifice, but he's not wearing that thing anymore, and neither should
No.
I. There are times when you got to let go of your cross because it doesn't belong there anymore. I came across a note I had written down from something our priest, Father Joe, had said in a homily. He said, be careful about embracing your cross so tightly that when it's time to let it go, you can't. Let's pause right about here. Then more with Tom here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. Quick Patreon shout out. Thanks, Kimberly. Kimberly recently joining the Patreon family and making this all go week to week. Thanks for that. Patreon.com or here at episode 309 at touchedbyheaven.net. The whys and wherefores of why people support. Regina?
Because this is positivity. These stories help other people. Like, people hear this. There is hope for everybody. Everybody, it don't matter where you came from or what you've done. Hear these stories have hope, inspiration. That's why I did that.
Thanks, Regina. Patreon.com, or here at touchedbyheaven.net, episode 309. All right, let's get back to Tom here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. What an incredible conversation on Good Friday. When we look at Jesus carrying that cross, offering himself up to the Father in place of us, and to have this conversation today about the cross and the crosses we carry and the crosses we're not supposed to carry anymore. Sometimes we just love our crosses. There are benefits to blindness. Very few people ask me to mow their lawn. You know what I'm saying?
When you talked about fear, I could totally identify with that. I probably came out of the womb a fearful child, and fear ruled my life. For a long, long, long time. So when I had that initial encounter with the Lord on the highway, there were two things that he spoke into my heart. He said, you can have this as long as you want it. And I was like, wow. See, I was my dad was, retired naval chief petty officer, ran the house like a ship. I had a mother who, I was her ninth of her 9 children, and she was a massive alcoholic. So I didn't really have any stability from the get-go. So I was afraid. And so when I had that initial encounter with God, and I'm realizing, wait a minute, I'm having an encounter with the ultimate authority. Oh, then the second thing he said to me, that's right. He said, I can do this for anyone. It's just that most people are afraid. And if you think back, see, in the Old Testament, there was a point where the children of Israel, everyone was hearing from God, speaking from the mountain, and they all freaked out. And they all said, tell you what, Moses, why don't we do it this way? You talk to God, and you come back and tell us what he said.
You don't want to hear from God, but they were so afraid. It just freaked them out.
They don't know that the gifts of the Spirit are for now, for today. They're needed now, really more than ever.
Yeah. And Paul said we're to seek it out. Paul tells us we're supposed to strive, and Jesus didn't say pray for the sick. He said heal the sick.
Right.
And cast out demons and all those things,
Oh, and well, I will tell you one thing. Satan's tried to get rid of me in different ways at different times. And one of the real clear ones, one time where he tried to drop a tree on me. And, well, I had a miracle. Right before this tree started falling, God had me say a quick little prayer in a storm. And then I'm like, am I supposed to pray about the weather? I never heard about doing nothing like that. And I prayed that God would plant angels under the clouds to protect against tornadic activity. So I'm trying to be Reader's Digest here for you. I was stuck at a light, cars in front of me. I couldn't move. All of a sudden, a few seconds later, this tree starts falling over, and it was going to crush the car with me in it.
So you're stuck in traffic?
6, 7, 8 cars.
But your car's not going anywhere, and this tree's coming down.
And the tree's coming down, and I knew I'm about to die. And then when that tree got to a 45-degree angle, it stopped all motion. It was hanging there. No leaves moving, nothing like the wind or nothing. It's just hanging there, totally just there. And I'm like, this is not possible. And then I began to watch the tree start to gently twist to where it wasn't even over my car. And then it kept going gently. I mean, it wasn't wind violence, okay? And when it wasn't even over the other line of traffic, the other lane, and when it's back over the parkway with all these other tall trees, that's when it dropped to the ground. And I was like, oh my gosh, what have I seen? I drove down the road, stopped at a convenience store, got me a little soda, and I heard a clerk and one customer talking, and one said to the other, did you see that funnel cloud? And I thought to myself, I did not see it, but I sure saw the results of it. But then I had that simple little prayer, and I saw the results, and I know God saved my butt from dying that day. And so when I got in touch with the fact that all those people who had rejected me and treated me like dirt and whatever, they were just pawns. And I realized my real enemy was Satan. I got mad about Satan. I realized he's really the one who did all this to me. And I felt like the best way I could get back at him was to give God carte blanche. Whenever, wherever, however, in whatever way you want to work through me, you got my permission. And that's how I get back at him.
This has been one of the most amazing conversations I had that just dropped out of the sky because you happened to watch a video about an eclipse.
Well, God will do. I tell people there ain't no such thing as coincidence. Get rid of the word luck, and it's divine providence, and be open to God, divine appointments. God knows how to do them, and He knows when to do them, and He knows when we're ready and when we're not. And even the gifts that He gives us, sometimes He withholds things that we really think we want, either because He knows it will bring harm if we really do get it, or if we get it in the wrong timing. And that's been a hard thing to learn.
It's very hard. Again, God is never late. And how many times I've thought that He is.
Yeah.
I laugh when I say it. I mean, I know it's like, I know you're never late, but man, that would have been a really good time to do X,
Right.
Because we always, all we see when we look through that keyhole into the other room, we see just such a small part, and He sees the whole picture, and we just don't. We're just holding the one puzzle piece. And
I need to get you more of my poetry. I need to email it to you, whatever. You need to see what I got, what
okay.
God's given me over the years.
And you need to be listening to Touched by Heaven. Because God is saying stuff. He's talking, and the conversations are flying right by us. And to your point about, you grew up in a church, and most of us do, regardless of what your faith is. We grow up in a church that deals in the physical and very little of the supernatural, unless it's in the Bible, as if God stopped working that way.
Bingo, that's right. When I was first reading through the Bible for myself back in '89, and I read about Joseph and Daniel, and I was greatly impressed by their strength of character under great stress. And so I asked God, not thinking anything, I just said, God, could you make me like Joseph and Daniel? Years later, and there was a point where I was visiting this little church, and there was this older lady. She had been in ministry for years, like an evangelist type, really sweet lady. And one day she comes up to me, she says, Tom, I had a dream. I want you to go home and pray about it and ask God to show you what I dreamt. Now, when she said that, I thought, this lady's got cooties I don't want. And she's missing some elevator floors. And okay. So I just said, okay, God, could you show me what she dreamt? Well, when I said that, all of a sudden it's like I'm watching this movie in my head. It was the front door. And the front door's open. And there's a man on his knees with his arms stretched wide. He was wearing a navy-colored pinstripe suit. He had sandy-colored hair, and he had brassy wire-rimmed glasses. And what he said was, will you marry me? So here it is, 2 days later, I'm back at that church. This lady makes a beeline for me. Did you do it? Did you do it? And I told her exactly. And she said, Tom, that's exactly what I dreamt. And she said, I need to tell you something. She said, I did not do this arbitrarily. God told me to ask you, and He told me you would be able to give me the right answer. And when all that happened, I remembered that prayer from years before where I asked God if I could be like Joseph and Daniel. And I was like, now, God, this is getting ridiculous. This is too much.
And I'm bumping into more and more of this, where there's more and more prophetic out there, and all prophetic is just being honest. It's just speaking the truth, not your truth, not my truth, but just.
Right.
In fact, I should tell you this too, because I keep going back to this as a reminder to me that when I get hits on music that plays in my head, and music is always playing in my head, and I'm supposed to spiritualize the lyrics. And I got to be careful, because my first run through with it isn't always correct. It sometimes plays out over time of, oh, that's what you meant,
Right.
So the dream I had, I'm at a football game. I don't see the players. I don't see the fans. I just see a little bit of the field, corner of the end zone, and a referee holding the football and running for a touchdown. And he scores a touchdown, and he turns around, he's kind of flipping the ball around, and I hear the word impartiality. Our job, as anybody who thinks that they might be getting messages, our job is not to jump to any conclusions. Our job is to say, here's what I heard, here's what it could mean, here's what it might mean, my sense is this, but we have to be really careful. For example, the eclipse thing. You got people online talking about it means rapture. It means in 40 days the U.S. is going down.
Yeah.
It means X, Y, and Z. It means, and I mean, people are coming up with just, it's like, what is this? No, just all you have to do is state the facts and contemplate, pray about it for sure, but you can't root for one side or the other. Pray, and your mind does conform more to his mind.
Yes, and that's what his objective is, that we be conformed to the character of Christ.
I always ask my guests, what's the takeaway? So, Tom, what's our takeaway?
Well, you know, we desperately need Jesus, and we need to make room for the Holy Spirit in our lives and quit thinking that we can do it all on our own. And I got to tell you something. It's been a long time since I've been interviewed by anybody. I'm talking about decades. So what I'm doing with you today is extremely unusual. And I want to thank you for being there and being on the front lines. And like I said, you see better than most.
Thank you, brother. It's been great. I think we're gonna be talking again. Let's stay in touch with each other. I think we're going to be combining messages. Is what it feels like.
I got more.
Okay, I'm sure you do. If someone's interested in your poetry, is there a place?
It's Sandra, Sandra, and AND, Tom, TOM, 1123 at yahoo.com.
And Sandra is?
My wife.
Funny how that happened, huh?
Well, we've been married 32 years. Hey, if you think about it, pray for us at some point, because I'll tell you what, we've gone through a lot, and she's got a lot of health issues.
Well, we'll certainly pray for her and both of you. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, buddy, unless there's something else.
I think that's a good start.
Thanks, Tom. Poetry next time, okay? Poetry next time. Life-changing, mind-body connection, how when the mind is healed, the body may also be healed. Prophetic dreams are in there. Divine interventions. It's all there. Powerful episode. Thanks again, Tom. God bless you. What's your story? You have one, don't you? Let me know here at touchedbyheaven.net. Thank you so much for your Patreon support and for why.
Here, these stories have hope, inspiration.
Patreon.com or here at episode 309, touchedbyheaven.net. See you next time here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack, and by now, pretty much a household name.
And I didn't even know you existed.